Notched straight edges. Okay, so what we're doing today is setting up a guitar that I have here, which is an old GTX Cayman, made sometime in the late 80s, I think. It's in pretty messed up shape, and in order to get this thing up and running, we need to make ourselves a couple of tools to aid us along the way. Amongst which are the soon to be available in my online shop notched straight edges. We'll be making these in the according scale length required to set up this guitar, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so as you can see, it's your typical super strap built by Ovation in the late 80s, but this particular one has aged about as well as a bottle of tap water from Flint, Michigan. Action is way higher than it should be, and it needs a fair bit of cleaning. Nothing we can't handle though. So the first thing we do in the process of making ourselves a lovely notched straight edge is measuring the length of our piece of aluminum. Using a plain old metal saw from your local pick and save, yeah, I'm that old, and cut the sheet to length. This sheet, by the way, approximates to something around 2 inches or 50 millimeters in width and is somewhere between 1/8 and 3/16 of an inch, which again is about 2 or 3 millimeters. Now I could have just used my table saw to cut this piece to length, but like I said, I want to demonstrate how to do this with the most basic and readily available tools. I also decided to try out this little dirt remover thingamajig, which, as it turns out, works like a charm. So before throwing out your old and clogged up sheets of sandpaper, just hit it with this little bad boy and it's good to go for another few rounds. Now it's just about making the end of the straight edge look neat, so using the belt grinder, you can just grind the end straight. So every now and then I just like to peruse through my shop, just enjoying the nice weather. This time round I happened to stumble upon a remnant of my olden days. Whatever could this be, I thought to myself, and hastily decided to unroll this divine scroll of infinite wisdom. Upon closer inspection, I could make out some strange sketches with numbers alongside of them, hinting at different scale lengths of stringed instruments. Wonderful, I thought to myself. Now I can use this scroll to transfer the fret positions to my sheet of aluminum and craft myself a tool meant for the gods of luthery. But as logical as that may sound, there is actually a better way to go about this. A much simpler and more accurate way of finding the fret positions of your instruments without having to measure out the actual scale length is to simply lay the sheet of aluminum on the neck and mark out the position of each fret. I know it may sound obvious, but if, like me, you are more than just a little bit retarded, this might not have been an idea to cross your mind. So having marked out all the fret positions, it's time to notch our straight edge. We do this using a simple 1/4-inch chainsaw sharpening file, say that 3 times fast, which can be had for a few pennies at your local Home Depot or sorts. I just happen to have this little machinist's vise laying around in which I like to fixate my aluminum straight edge, but I guess you could also get away with using 2 clamps or something to hold it in place. Whatever peels your banana, I guess. Using your chainsaw sharpening file, you just file down halfway into the aluminum and you've got yourselves pretty much a notched straight edge, which you can now use to get a proper measurement of how curved or bowed your neck might be and perfectly straighten the neck of your guitar. What I'm doing right here is using a perfectly leveled tile with a sheet of 400 grit sanding paper adhered to it to perfectly level the non-notched parts of the notched straight edge. That way the lowest points of the straight edge will always be perfectly level and give you a perfect indication of how straight your neck actually is. Now before doing anything to the truss rod of your guitar, you should make sure to take off the old strings. Especially if they've been around since the United States and Saddam were still allies. The reason we wanted notches in our straight edge in the first place was so that we could accurately measure how straight or bowed our neck is. By placing the notched straight edge neatly over the frets, the unnotched parts of the straight edge should now rest perfectly on the fretboard. Using a flashlight, you can easily make out areas where there's too much tension or relief in the neck, so we need to take a simple 3/16 inch or 5mm Allen key and increase the tension of the truss rod by turning the whole thing clockwise. But with older guitars, you can never be sure if someone actually installed the truss rod upside down, so it doesn't hurt to check using your newly acquired tool. Having straightened the neck, you can now see that there's very little light that shows beneath the notched straight edge, indicating the neck is now perfectly straight. So it's time to check if the frets are level. This little thingamabob is called a fret rocker. You place it over 3 frets at a time and rock the thing back and forth, hence the name. That way you will have a sonic indication of high frets, which will in turn need to be sanded level. Can you hear that? High frets, not good. Quick tip by the way, don't try to memorize where there's high spots in the frets. Take a Sharpie and just mark those suckers. Don't be afraid, you've already dedicated yourself to making a straight edge. So just see this through. Leave your comfort zone. The worst that could happen is that you'll end up with a good excuse to buy a new guitar. I already told you when starting out that this guitar was in bad shape. These here Sharpie markings showcase just that perfectly. In fact, I don't think these frets were ever treated with the respect they deserve. Aluminum square, sandpaper, duct tape, super glue. You don't need anything super fancy. 400 grit will get you a long way in these parts. Cut a strip the width of your sanding block. Add a strip of duct tape to both the sanding paper and the aluminum block. Apply a thin bead of super glue along the length of the sanding block. Sandwich the whole thing together firmly and level away. Just make sure to apply even pressure if at all. I just let the weight of the aluminum do the work for me. Once all the marker was gone, I remarked the tops of the frets, because now it's time to crown those suckers and polish them. At this point, I'm simply going through the motions. If you want a full description of what's going on, I'll leave a link to a separate video in the right hand corner of the vid, as well as the description. Having buffed the frets to a nice mirror shine, it's time to clean the guitar and condition the fretboard. I like to use gunstock oil for pretty much everything, because the usual fretboard conditioners tend to include lemon oil, which will mean certain death for every type of wood lighter than rosewood. Having stringed up your guitar, you want to make sure that the bridge saddles co-align with the radius of the fretboard. That way you'll get the best possible action. So the action is now infinitely better than when I began the setup process, but it's still sketchy to say the least. The proper thing to do at this point would be to shim the neck, but since this video is already going on long enough, I'll just save that process for another quick video. Now would you look at that, in pretty much no time we were able to get a pretty nicely set up guitar that's ready to rock. And all we needed for that was the help of our trusty little notched straight edge, which we were able to make just by using some simple tools. Now if you don't want to go through the hassle of making one of these for yourself, you can go ahead and check out my shop, where I will, in a short period of time, probably have these available. You'll be able to choose 2 scale lengths, 1 for each side. I'll probably even figure out some cool way to to make something like a 25.5 inch and a 34 inch. So you can use it for your guitar and your bass, should you have one. Check out my shop, javelinguitars.com, and hopefully within the next 1 or 2 weeks we'll be able to get started on the X-Type Raffle Build. But more on that in a separate short video. So without me blabbering on, let's just go and check out
what this thing sounds like.